Now that we've learned how to create basic 3D roller coaster track in 3ds Max and how to create a path in order for the track to follow, now we're going to look at some basic cleanup work. And as I discussed last video, we had several different ways to manipulate the path and twist the track around. Another approach here, for instance, if you want to do a loop, let's go ahead and take a look at that loop. I will go ahead and begin by drawing a circle that's going to it's going to be a perfect circle, but we'll start off in the left side view, and we're going to go ahead and click and draw that circle approximately the size that we want the loop to be. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take that loop, hit modify, and we're going to go ahead and break that down into a spline. So we're going to edit spline. Here we have the ability to look at the various points, and one of the things we're going to do later is weld points together, but there are ways of also taking and splitting a point into two different pieces. If you look at down the right here, we have several different options that you can choose from. In a little bit we're going to look at weld, but here we're going to use break. Once we hit break, we actually have two different line segments. Now the circle is still one spline, but the vertice is now two. And what we can do with that is we could go out here to the front view, grab one of those points, slide it this way, grab the other point and slide it this way. And what you'll notice in a perspective view is that we're starting to create that loop effect. Now the other things you need to keep in mind is coaster loops aren't perfect circles. Typically they're somewhat oblong. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull this up just a little bit. And I'm also going to take those 2 points, bring them down a little bit. And it'll be your personal preference. We can still adjust these pieces once we are done with the whole process of the coaster. I'll maybe drag that over to influence that, as well as drag this over and influence that a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and exit the spline command here and move this over to the side here so that we can get a better look at it in the front view. But it's not a perfect straight line because it has to come up and come back through its particular way. But now what I can do is take a piece of track, and I think I'll just grab this piece that I've already worked with and choose a different path. I'll pick a new path, move to path, and I'm going to go ahead and stretch that back a little bit, as well as maybe push the percentage down. So here we go. We've got this loop. And it is a little messy here because we do have to tweak some of the rotation around. But if you notice, if we get just the right angle, I think 60 looks, that it will be, it'll stay consistent and won't twist through. If you're not happy with the loop and you want to do more of a corkscrew, well, you can hide the track that you're working with, go into the actual line here, and then maybe start working with pulling these parts farther away from each other, using a little bit of tweaking here. And then all we have to do is unhide the piece, and you'll notice that it did follow the changes I made. Now it's not quite what I want, and this is where you might want to break it down into two various parts so that you have a piece coming up and then a piece coming down, which will give you the ability to go in and do more twists and turns. And again, to adjust the PathDeform portion, you do have to select the text, or I'm sorry, you do have to select the track, not the actual path. So we'll go ahead and tweak this around a little bit, do some twists in here, and that's starting to look pretty good. Something a little bit more dynamic, and in a bit we'll go ahead and practice with actually having the coaster follow this path. Some other things we can do to do some cleanup work is to create a ground plane which we obviously need to give the illusion while we're riding the ride that we're up high or down low towards the ground. And most of you may say, well, let's just create a plane. I always suggest using a box, and it doesn't have to be a very thick box, just a little box. I know there's a couple extra faces in there, but that gives you the ability to cut into it if you need to. So if the coaster comes down the hill and you want to create a little valley, the thickness of the box will allow you to do that. If you have a plane and you cut a hole in a plane, you're just going to have a hole there. So using the box might be beneficial to you. It also gives you the illusion, again, that we've got something that's established here, that we're on the ground. Let's come in here real quick. I'm going to hide this. I'm going to move this path up with the other ones. There we go. A little better. Unhide all. Okay. So, and I do have a video on creating 3D landscapes that you can use to make your coaster better. But one of the things that coasters need to have are supports to actually hold them up. So if I do a basic cylinder is kind of the best way to do this. I just kind of come way into the top view and I pick any given spot and I create a little bit of a cylinder post here. Now this post is very small, and that's one of the issues with working with such a big project like a roller coaster. And I'm going to take this and rotate it down here a little bit. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees up so that when I hit extrude, or when I change the size, the base is always touching the ground. Now you'll see here when I go in and I do height, you'll notice that as I pull this down here, it extrudes up. And I really don't need these segments in here, so I'm going to go ahead and take that down to 1, because this is just a basic cylinder. Maybe even cutting the sides down to 16, because this is not as important as the track. We'll see more of the track than we will the supports. And we want to be cautious of the amount of geometry we actually have to work with. Now here at the top, most coasters have some kind of bent support. So let's do this. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to clone, holding shift, I'm going to clone this piece. I'm going to shrink it way down. And you can do a couple different things. You can rotate it, such as this, to have the support kind of just sticking out there. And you'll notice when we look at the actual track, we'll zoom way in here in the 3D view, it's not the cleanest look. Now, how much time do you want to spend on this? That is going to be your call. Our goal is to get one done right, and then we can go ahead and clone it. At this point, we could use like a mitering technique where you could edit mesh these pieces and kind of flatten them out. You also could go with the old compound object Boolean method here, where you could subtract sections from each other. And the goal here is that this piece is kind of touching, and these straight pieces don't really bend much. Here's how I have approached it before with an edit mesh. I kind of go in, grab each section, and move it up into here a little bit. This does take a few minutes to set up, but once you have it done right the first time, you can simply clone this and re-edit mesh it to match any particular points that you want through your model. It's one way of doing this. Not the perfect way, but one way. The other thing that we can do is kind of scratch this all together. And you can take this piece and go right up to, with an edit mesh, go right up to the track. So I pull this, let's pull this up here, pull these pieces up here, kind of lining it up with the actual track. Again, if you overlap and go inside, the track, it won't look so bad. This is probably the simplest form for what you're shooting for, just to kind of come up. And you could actually even grab these various pieces and scale them down a little bit. And that makes a support, but that one here is kind of tapered. I actually am not going to go that route. I'm going to go ahead and leave it go. So there are several different ways. Some additional things you can do down here is add yet another cylinder. This one here makes a big difference, and I think you should try to at least work this one into your project. Each steel support has some kind of concrete base. I'm going to go ahead and double that up. Throw a little footer in there. And this is a important time for you to go ahead and choose your colors as well, because these pieces are going to be individual. I'll go ahead and drop in my blue, and then I'm actually going to go out to let's go out to the architectural and just find Autodesk Concrete and drop that on there, and that way I have a concrete foundation with a steel post. One additional feature that makes this even better is that these steel beams have gussets on them, and that is just a gusset's just a support that kind of adheres to the actual beam. Here I'm making a little shape. I'm going to extrude and just give it a 1 with no segments. And I want to copy this around in a circular motion. The easiest way to do that is to take the hierarchy button, affect the pivot only, and even just eyeball it in the center of the actual pillar. I always like to turn on my angle snap toggle, hit rotate. Notice we're not quite perfectly centered here. We could go ahead and drop all of these on the center axis just to line them up. But let's do this. We've got this circle, which is down here, and we've got this one here. So I'm going to drop that kind of right there. I'm going to go ahead and take my rotate tool, hold shift. I'm going to go 30 degrees, throw in 12. And you can mesh all of these together simply by grabbing this particular piece, which you've already got edit mesh going, hit attach, and just click all the different gussets to add this piece together there. Now, because I'm working with such a vast scene, it's not rotating to the best of my ability. But once you have this done, you only got to do it once. Oops. Once you have this done, you're just going to be able to rapidly clone these sections. And I think I'm just going to spin around the coaster one more time here and zoom in to grab the remainder of these pieces. 1, 2, 3. Now I think I have them all. Let's just test it by moving it. Nope, we got one left. So again, we'll drop back, scale around here, zoom in. And I think I might have made one too many gussets. That's why that one there we go. So to make this easy and simple so we don't have to keep cloning multiple objects, I'm going to grab the support, and I'm also going to attach the foundation piece. That way the concrete and the metal stay separated. Now it's just a matter of applying these things or moving them into the location that you need them. For instance, this section is nice and straight, so I can hold shift, clone. I'll do 10 copies. Okay. Now they're not all the same height, but at least they're strategically placed in the same direction. Now, just using the left view, click each one. I'm already in Edit Mesh. All I have to do is select the top pieces here and move them up to intersect with the track. Then I come down here. Oops. Select the next one. Take the vertices, move them up. So all that detail paid off in the long run. That the cloning technique that we're going to use here, and this can be used for the whole entire coaster. Now, in addition to this, you could say, you know what, some of these beams need to be kind of at an angle. So I would go in and maybe do something like this, where you come up here and say, all right, let's just take this, kick it down to an angle. And better yet, now we can mirror that one with a clone and slide that over. And you've got yourself some nice A-frame structures, which again are very common with 3D roller coasters. One last thing we need to do to clean up this mess before we actually get on to starting to make the coaster cars follow the track. And you'll want to do this once you've completed your whole roller coaster, not just the section that I have here for demonstration purposes, is to adjoin all of your pieces together. So I'm going to pause the video just briefly here, and I'm going to set up a couple pieces to do a demonstration for you. Okay, so I cleaned this piece up here, and what I've got now is I've got one line that comes down here and stops, another line that starts here and continues, and we had to do that in several different locations to represent the different pieces of track that we were working with. So I actually went and I colored these different, so you can see that there are 3 different lines in here. I'll go ahead and even change this one to a different color. So there we have 3 different pieces of track, therefore we have 3 different lines. Once you have an idea of how things are laid on, we want to go ahead and we want to hide these pieces of track, because we're not doing anything to them just yet. We're simply using the lines to manipulate that track. We need to make it so that these 2 pieces are right on top of each other. Now, we don't want to attach them yet, because that's going to come at a later lesson. But what we do want to do is get them in the same spot. When I select a particular line and I go over to the Modify panel and select the vertice, I click on the end of one of those lines. With my Move tool selected, you're going to see a number down here in the X, Y, and Z. Now, this number may not be the prettiest, and you probably could round some of these off. I'm going to go just to 0 here, which isn't going to move it pretty much at all. Take this one here, maybe remove that 261 and just hit enter, and then maybe remove this 695 and hit enter. So these numbers are still kind of ugly, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and write these numbers down, and we're going to have to do this for every point where 2 lines are coming together. We're going to negative 0.001. For Y, I've got a 1855, and for Z, I've got a 807. Now, your numbers are definitely going to be different than mine. These are just that is the exact point in off the grid, off the axis, center axis of the grid, where this point is located. But what I want to do is now jump out of here, click this line, select its vertice, and I'm going to take and move that using the Move tool in the same location. Negative 0.001. In the Y, I'm going to do a 1. That'd be a negative 11855. And then in the Z, I'm going to be at an 807. Now, even though these are 2 different lines, these points are very, 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 very close. In fact, I can keep zooming in here, and I don't think I'm ever going to see the point where they're separated. So now that they're together, that means that when I unhide the track is technically sitting on top of each other. You may have to play with the percentage a little bit here. So I go up, and here at 0 it's overlapping, at 0.5 it's not, so I could tweak this around like a 0.2, or maybe do a 0.1, 0.3, 0.35. Get it as close as we can, and visually you may still have to do some anchor manipulation to kind of get these to line up. Now we're not going to get perfection here for this, but from the top view, we're probably going to see that this thing here will visually look connected while we're on the ride. Even do a render here. And it's very hard to see that seam there, which is not going to be an issue when we're actually playing around with this in the animation mode. So your next step is to go in to match up all those points. Now again, we're not attaching them yet. We will be shortly, but we don't want to attach them yet because that's going to affect how the PathDeform works. In a future lesson, we're going to go ahead and edit mesh all the pieces together once they're done. Then we'll edit spline the path together. And finally, we'll have an object follow that entire path, which will follow the contour for the most part of the roller coaster track. We'll see you in the next lesson.